boys and girls, students of Buddhist Sunday school and Dhamma classes, parents and grandparents, and teachers of Buddhist Sunday school and Dhamma classes. May you all be well, happy, and peaceful. Now we are going to have a presentation. Actually, it is the continuation of the story of Buddha Gautama, part 5. This is a very inspiring story of the Buddha Gautama that can inspire and motivate us to follow his teachings, the Dharma. So we will continue from where we left off in part 4. If you have missed the other parts, you can check up on the previous presentations over YouTube, but you can actually also view this quite independently. Now, as usual, we are going to have a presentation where the texts are in English and Chinese. The Chinese is done by Google Translate, so it may not be 100% accurate, but it will give you a better idea, especially for those who don't understand sufficient English or who don't read English proficiently. So this is the presentation we are going to show. Now, we are going to launch the PowerPoint, the slide presentation, starting from the beginning. You can see the curtain opening up for the title slide. Story of Buddha Gautama, part 5. I put in the pictures here to depict or to illustrate the events or the slides that have a bearing with these pictures. Just a selection because you have limited space here. So you will see the relevance of these pictures later on as we go through the story in each of the slides. Now let us go on to slide number 2. Of all the disciples of the Buddha, Ananda, his cousin, was the most devoted to him. So the Buddha selected him to be his close attendant. Ananda, a foremost disciple of the Buddha, served as attendant to the Buddha for, I think, more than 25 years of his 45 years of spreading the Dhamma or his ministry. And he was a very remarkable Buddhist monk with a very fantastic memory, and he did his duties all very well, right? So very highly respected, well-liked by all people, including the fellow monks, because he was kind and very, very gentle, and he had many, many good qualities. So that's why the Buddha selected him to be his close attendant, where he would attend to all the needs of the master, the Buddha, and also it was him, who could remember all the teachings and discourses given by the Buddha. So that is something about Ananda. Now, another of Buddha's cousins was also a monk, also became a monk. And this cousin of his was Devadatta. But Devadatta was not a good monk. He at first was okay, so he cultivated and then he practiced and he got the psychic powers, He could do all sorts of so-called miraculous actions, like maybe walking over water, or maybe, creating certain images and a lot of these so-called psychic powers. But he became egoistic, very proud. He was jealous of the Buddha. And at one stage, he asked the Buddha to let him take over the leadership because he said the Buddha was getting old. So he was arrogant, So we are going to see the events pertaining to Devadatta, right? Quite difficult to get the pictures of Devadatta or the paintings. So I just managed to get this one. And let us move on to the next part, which actually continues the story. So now let us go to slide number 3. In slide number 3, more about Devadatta. So Devadatta was very conceited, very proud and arrogant. And he was jealous. So you see, all the bad qualities started to come out already. Right? And he was jealous of the 2 chief disciples of the Buddha. The 2 chief disciples of the Buddha were Sariputta and Moggallana. Sariputta, the foremost monk of wisdom. Next to the Buddha, he was the best in wisdom already, right? He could give talks and answer questions on the Dhamma and so on. There was Sariputta. And the other one that had fantastic psychic powers was Moggallana. Right? Moggallana became an arahant, just 7 days after he joined the Buddha as a disciple. Sariputta, it was 2 weeks before he became an arahant, an enlightened one. But this Devadatta, he was jealous, So, he was not, having good conduct. And actually, there came a stage where he left the Sangha, right? And the Sangha means the order of the monks and nuns, the community of the Sangha members where he was supposed to stay with. So he left and then he became friend of the crown prince of Ajatasattu. And during that time, in that kingdom, the king was King Bimbisara. And King Bimbisara had a son. And the son's name was Ajatasattu. But some very tragic things happened. So this Devadatta, since the Buddha sort of, did not accept him as a close disciple because he was not of good character and conduct. So he went to make friends with this Ajatasattu, and he showed it Ajatasattu some psychic powers. So Ajatasattu thought that he was enlightened already, an arahant already, Wow, so became very devoted to him. The prince built a private monastery for Devadatta. And then I would give him dana, fantastic big dana of maybe hundreds of dishes. The account said that every day 500 dishes. This is an exaggeration, I feel. He just said that he gave fantastic dana for him, supported him. And then this Devadatta was not a good monk. You know what he did? You can see the picture. He persuaded the prince to kill his own father, the prince's father, who was a very good king. And that king was King Bimbisara. So he said, no, it's time for you to become a king. So you have to get rid of your father. And then he carry tales and all the stuff. And this Ajatasattu really followed the Devadatta's evil plan, because he thought that he was an arahant, he knew what should be done. And then he put the father, into jail and starved the father until the father died. And then he became the king. Wow, was a terrible, terrible, wrongful, unwholesome action, a very bad karma, evil karma to kill a parent, right? So that is a brief story about this Devadatta and also Bimbisara. You can see the picture here, Devadatta, the bad monk, right? Telling the terrible things to the prince, Ajatasattu, and King Bimbisara was a very good king actually. And this Ajatasattu became the king after the father was killed off. So this is a part of the slide 3, the narration. So now let us go to slide 4 now. Slide 4. So Devadatta became very powerful. because he was quite close, very close to the new king. Ajatasattu was his friend, and also a great supporter of him, you see. And, so some of the monks followed this Devadatta, because they thought that Devadatta, wow, favored by the new king. Right? And Devadatta was ambitious, he was arrogant. He wanted to become the leader of all the monks. He wanted to take the place, of the Buddha. And actually, he asked the Buddha for permission to take over. No, the Buddha did not agree. Because, even the Buddha did not ask Moggallana or Sariputta to take his position. And this Devadatta was not a good cultivated monk, right? So he refused him and gave him some so-called lectures, right? Saying you are not worthy to become a successor, to take over. And now you want to be taking over my position in front of all, So he felt very, very humiliated and insulted. Was very angry with the Buddha. So he decided to kill the Buddha. So on one occasion, you know what he did? He knew that the Buddha and his monks would be walking by on their arms round, or maybe, going back in the evening or something like that. So one evening, while the Buddha was walking past a rocky hill, and actually you can see the picture here, the drawing here, right? So, Devadatta at the top there, you can see here also more clearly, right? Getting ready to push the rock onto the Buddha with the intention of killing him, right? So as the Buddha was walking past that rocky hill, so Devadatta pushed a huge stone, or you could say a rock, down the hillside. Actually, he intended to kill the Buddha, but actually it's a natural law that nobody can kill a Buddha. The Buddha will die a natural death. It's a law of nature, right? So the huge stone broke up into small pieces and did not actually kill the Buddha, but one of the small pieces hurt the toe of the Buddha on the foot, a part of the foot, that means the toe. So the blood came out, so blood was drawn out. So he did not succeed in killing the Buddha. Devadatta did not succeed. The Buddha returned to the monastery and was treated by the famous doctor there that tended to kings and Buddhas and the other disciples. The name very famous, Jivaka. You can see that in history there was supposed to be a very famous physician in India, Jivaka, Dr. Jivaka. The picture shows this also. So now see, so Devadatta had done something very, very bad. It's what we call a heavy karma, Garuka karma. You have these 5 types of Garuka karma, heavy karma, where the vipaka or the effects or result will take place immediately after death. One is to hurt a Buddha, a Sammasambuddho, or a Buddha, to hurt a Buddha. You cannot kill, right? And then second one is to kill an Arahant. The third one is to kill your mother. Fourth one is to kill the father. And the 5th type of bad karma, heavy karma, is where you cause the Sangha to split, which means you sort of cause the group of Sangha members to separate off, quarrel with one another because you cucuk, batu api, cucuk here and there like that. So you cause the quarrel, and the Sangha, the group of monks, all this split into 2 or even more parts. So these 5 types of evil karma will have the terrible effect, and a person that commits this, according to the scriptures, will be drawn into hell. Garuka karma, right, will go into Amici hell. A long, long time the person will be there. So now you see, Devadatta had breached this law of the karma already, that he hurt the Buddha and caused the blood to come out from the foot. Now let us see what will happen next. So let us go on to slide number 5 now. So actually his evil plot failed, isn't it? He could not succeed. He could not succeed. Actually, he tried, according to some accounts in the scriptures, there are 3 times that he tried. But here we are going to narrate 2 very significant incidents where Devadatta tried to kill the Buddha. The first one we mentioned already, about he pushing the rock down the top of the hill, hoping to kill the Buddha, as the Buddha with his monks were walking by, past the hillside. So another occasion, you know what he did? Devadatta got the King Ajasattu to help her to release a wild elephant. Some accounts talk about Devadatta giving the elephant minuman arak, the intoxicants, the liquor until the elephant became drunk But anyway, the elephant was a wild elephant also, and quite dangerous, ferocious. It could kill one, this wild elephant, not tame yet. So this Devadatta asked for permission to use that elephant to try to kill the Buddha. So he planned all these things. So when the Buddha was on his daily alms round, I think you can see the picture here. Now today we still have that pindapat, isn't it? Some of you have done this also, to give food to the monks or nuns when they go around early in the morning for the food in their alms bowl, and you put the food, not to give money. So that time it was like that. So now the tradition in the Theravada school is still being practiced. So as Buddha leading all the monks passed away, the elephant came already. The elephant charged wildly towards the Buddha. So at the distance, Ananda saw the dangerous situation, So Ananda quickly, he was very, very protective of the Buddha, attendant, So he came in front of the Buddha, wanting to block the Buddha from this danger. He wouldn't mind sacrificing his own life, but he would save the master. That sort of devotion and loyalty of Venerable Ananda. But the Buddha asked him, you step aside, do not be afraid, right? Buddha was so calm, not the least frightened. He's a fully enlightened Buddha. Ananda at that time was not enlightened yet, He had reached maybe first stage of sainthood. So, but you know what happened? It did not work, because as the Buddha walked towards the elephant charged at the Buddha radiated his enormous metta, or loving kindness, a very powerful, metta, loving kindness. So when the elephant came near, the elephant also became soft already. The elephant became so gentle, and then sat down already. You could see the picture here, right? And even paid respect to the Buddha. And the Buddha was not the least frightened or agitated or so on. It's Buddha, So it was a full of metta, So Devadatta Malula, he could not succeed in second time here, right? To try to kill the Buddha. And then he again tried to break up the Sangha. So you see now he will be committing another Garuka Karma to cause trouble in the Sangha, to cause the Sangha community of monks to split, not agree on things. So, terrible bad intention. I put in various pictures to show this very touching scene of how the Buddha no need to use any weapons, but just use the power of metta. I could tame this Nalagiri, was the name of the elephant. And he was so gentle and likable already. So a very interesting episode that gives you confidence in the power of metta. I've posted on the practice of metta bhavana before, isn't it? So now we have number 5. So now let us go on to number 6 now. This is slide number 6. So, he tried all sorts of ways. So now he got this intention. He wanted to split the Sangha. So one day, right, he approached the Buddha in front of all the other disciples of the Buddha. right? And you know what he told the Buddha? Devadatta asked the Buddha, you must have more strict rules of conduct for the Sangha, right? He said, the monks must be vegetarians, don't eat any meat, and then they must not just go and sleep in the houses, the kutis lah. They must go and sleep under the trees, nature. And then also, they must not go to people's houses to accept dana for the food. And all these are funny requests. The Buddha, in all his wisdom, knew that it was not practical. They have to go around to beg for food. So how can they be vegetarians? People give you anything, you have to accept. You cannot say, oh, I cannot eat this, I cannot eat that. That's not the way of, arms round begging for food, isn't it? Right? And then also, he had some other funny requests about, the type of robe you can only wear, this type of robe. The Buddha knew that it was not practical and he would sort of, interfere with the practice. So the Buddha said, no to all this. So the Buddha actually said, if some monks prefer to sleep in the open under the trees and they prefer to be vegetarians, they are free to do so. But we carry on our tradition still the same way, go around, walk in the path. But then if some do not wish to live in the open, right, but they want to stay in their kuti, their hut, they are allowed also. And if some don't want to be vegetarians, they want to be meat. So the Buddha was very, very logical and wise. Right? And then the Buddha knew that he was trying to break up the Sangha. The Buddha warned him, Devadatta, if you try to break up the Sangha, you will reap the evil fruits, which means that you will be committing a heavy karma called Garuka karma, right? And after that, you can be propelled into terrible hell, the Avicii hell. But Devadatta didn't bother. But then, some of the monks, actually the newer ones, wow, very impressed by this Devadatta. No? Wow, you see, he wants to cultivate well, to be more austere. Austere means to practice harder, not enjoying all the comfort, everything. Well, this must be a monk. Wow, very good one. So he let, a few hundred monks followed Devadatta, the younger ones. So the Sangha was split the first time, and that was a heavy karma, right? So you could see that this Buddha explaining to him, but he did not want to listen. So it caused the Sangha to split, a very, very serious offense, a heavy karma. So now we will have to move to number 7 now. This is slide number 7. So Buddha already gave him the warning, but he didn't want to bother. He ignored the Buddha's warning because of the ego, the conceit and the arrogance. So as I told you, some younger monks follow him. So he led away a group of monks and made himself their leader. Right? So then the chief disciples of the Buddha, the Sariputta, Venerable Sariputta, later on, right, reported to the Buddha. So one day when Devadatta was asleep, actually the Buddha sent Sariputta and Moggallana, right, to go to see this Devadatta and the disciples and explain things so that the disciples will not be led astray with the wrong teachings, you see, following the wrong monk. That was the intention. So Sariputta and Moggallana approached the group led by Devadatta. Devadatta was asleep during that time. So anyway, Sariputta gave the Dhamma talk and explained everything very clearly of the actual teachings that should be followed, given by the Buddha. Right? And these monks realized, because Sariputta, wow, so well known for the wisdom, just next after Buddha only, such a high wisdom. So he could convince these monks. So these monks realized their mistake. They followed the wrong one already, this Devadatta. So actually they went back. But one account said that actually Devadatta, when he saw the Sariputta and Moggallana, he thought Sariputta and Moggallana came to join him already, but he was mistaken. That, when after Sariputta gave the talk, so he could lead the majority all back to the Buddha. But there was some still hardcore ones, definitely, right? They will still stick to Devadatta. So he still had a small group of followers now. But this account said that Devadatta was sleeping, right? Anyway, it doesn't matter. The main line is that he came to know of it. When he woke up, he was so angry, so angry. Wow, he was very, very mad. But then, he, with all the misconduct, the wrong actions, lost all his psychic powers already. And even Ajasattu realized that he actually not really an arahant already, because he could not show any more psychic powers. And Ajasattu also, actually there's another story of the Ajasattu. He realized he didn't want to support Devadatta already. He went to confess to the Buddha, to listen to the Dhamma, but because he killed the father, Garuka Karma also, so he could not really see the Dhamma, everything. And of course, Ajasattu would also have rebirth in the hell because killed the father, right? So, but anyway, a time came when Devadatta became very, very sick. This is cause and effect taking place. He began to regret his action, right? He said that, he realized he had done wrong. So he wanted to go to confess to the Buddha and ask for forgiveness. But the karma had already been committed. But anyway, he was so very sick, he asked his servants to take him. He couldn't walk to see the Buddha at a distance. So he had to be fetched on the stretcher, like, you see the St. John's ambulance or the ambulance. Sometimes I have to carry a person on the stretcher. Couldn't walk and everything. So he asked to, and then that time they had to go by foot. So they had to walk. And then just not far from the place where Buddha was staying, I think it was in one of the monasteries, right? And Devadatta felt thirsty. So he asked the servants, or you can say his disciples, to stop. So he would get down and try to make his way to a nearby pond or something like that where he could take some water. But the moment he, stepped out of his stretcher and put his foot on the ground split, like an earthquake, The ground split and the fire came out according to account, and Devadatta was dragged deep into the earth. That was this account in one writing also. But anyway, he died in a very, very shocking manner. So he could not manage to see the Buddha because of terrible karma, not once, but altogether actually 3 times. So we narrated here 2 times. So Devadatta died a very, very painful death, and he was sucked to the depths of the earth. So when the Buddha's disciples who came to know of this reported to the Buddha, then the Buddha explained he had committed very heavy karma, and he passed away in that way. He will be reborn, or he was reborn in Avicii hell. And it will be a long, long, long time in hell to pay back the bad karma. And after a long, long, long time already, then he could also come back as a human being, because also he had done some good. And then according to one account, he will become a Pachika Buddha in a long, long time. After a long, long time in Avicii hell. So that's an interesting story of this Devadatta. Now let's go on to slide number 8 now. Slide number 8. So let us look at the Buddha's daily life and his ministry to continue the story of the life of the Buddha. So the Buddha was, perfect in wisdom, compassion, morality, everything perfect. Is a fully enlightened one. It's quite disciplined also, right? And for 45 years he preached, And during that time, no taxi or no car or what, you got to walk, You walk from place to place, village to village. In northern India, that area, those who go on pilgrimages will visit some of the places where the Buddha was in his ministry of 45 years. And then he managed to convert quite a number of people from their wrong practices. They have been killing in their praying to their gods, and then doing a lot of superstitious things. So the Buddha preached the Dhamma actually for 45 years. And the first one we have seen before, he preached to the five bhikkhus, the first five disciples. So the Buddha traveled different kingdoms to different kingdoms in India, always on foot. And during the rainy season, India, you have 3 seasons, the hot season, the rainy season, and then the winter season. So during these rainy seasons, so this is the Vasa period. So the Buddha and his disciples, as today also they practice this, they will not go wandering homeless already, right? Because it's heavy rain, so you step outside on the ground, you might, kill some small animals and so on, that will come out and so on. And then people also would find it difficult to give you, come out and give you food, isn't it? So the people would bring the food to the monasteries. So during the rainy season, he would stay in certain monasteries, donated, for him by the Sangha. For him and the Sangha by different lay supporters. Of course, the Buddha at that time now was very famous already and got a lot of supporters. And among the places he stayed most number of times were these places like Rajagaha, a beautiful hilly area. And the king there also donated one monastery ground, we can say. It's called Veduvana, which translates as bamboo grove, because a lot of bamboo grown there. And also there was another very rich lay supporter by the name of Anatta Pindaka, millionaire, and he donated a big monastery called Jetavana Monastery. If you go to India on pilgrimage, you can visit this place. But now you find, because in the history, the course of time, India was invaded by the Muslims, and then a lot of destruction took place. So this you could now only see the remnants, the ruins. Last time was monastery with the places of dwelling, the temples and so on. Now all tapak only the foundations only this to show this this one just show the pindapat setting where they will go barefooted to get their arms put. So in these 45 years, the Buddha worked very hard, to spread the teachings. And because of the spread of the teachings, later on, of course, the Arahant monks who were there to listen, they recorded all these things by oral tradition, because no books were written, no computers, nothing. But they memorized so many Arahants. That's how the teachings were passed down the line, right? So that is this slide number 8 now. So now let us go on to number 9 now. Slide number 9. Now let us now look at the routine of the daily life of the Buddha. Now you find he's a very disciplined person, and he would, follow a very systematic way, which is actually a good thing for us to follow. We just cannot just do things without, a proper order, and then simply just according to our whims and fancies, our mood and emotion. He was disciplined. That was, I think, is a good point. And he was diligent also. Right? All the good qualities. So the Buddha would usually wake up before sunrise. Then he would take a bath. Not in the bathroom or shower like what you all have. You have to go to the river. To go to the river to take the bath. And then after that, he would contemplate, or he would think and reflect for that day, whom would he want to teach? Whom would he want to go to? Because not all people are ready to receive the Dhamma. As today, I find the same thing. There's some no affinity for Dhamma. You might as well don't waste your time. You have to use your wisdom. For here, we are not the Buddha. Sometimes difficult to. I made mistake also. I thought this fellow was very interested. When at the end, I found that no, he was not at all interested. So I stopped already. But the Buddha was perfect, So he knew who could be helped, Who were the people ready. So when he found someone ready, like, Angulamala, you know the story, he found there was this person, there were others also. So then he would approach them, When he found someone ready to understand and accept the teaching, he would go and teach that person for that day. That was his routine. So one day, sometimes maybe 1 or 2 or 3, or sometimes he would also preach to others. And then after sunrise already, the Buddha would go to beg for alms from people in the in the neighborhood. Alms rounds. You could see this picture shows very nicely. Even though it's just a drawing or what, to show. Today also we have this happening. Imagine after more than 2,500 years, you still have this happening. Sometimes he would go alone. The Buddha actually liked to be alone, solitude. But he still stay in the monastery. Sometimes he go to the forest to practice. Even though after enlightenment, he would still go into the meditation to reach the jhanas and so on. Sometimes he would go with the monks, the retinue or the line of monks. And then there will be also the time also, some people, lay people will invite him to go to their homes, right? As you call house dana. Today also we have that also. Sometimes you go out for pindapat, that's called pindapat. Sometimes accept people's offer, go to the house and then take the food. So after the meal, usually it was the tradition, the Buddha would teach the Dhamma, would give a very short Dhamma talk or some very good Dhamma advice and so on. Then he will return to the monastery or to his kuti already. I told you the time people already built the kutis for them at various places also. You see? So these pictures I selected to give you an idea in line with the slide. So now let us go on to slide number 10 now. Right? Now let us go to number 10 now. Now, what would the Buddha do after his alms round? Back at the monastery, the Buddha would rest quietly in the hall, under a tree, depending. Sometimes he'll be resting quietly in the hall. Sometimes he would go and meditate under the tree or in his kuti, the room there, just a small hut or thing like that. And then, there will be other monks that have not come back from their alms round. So we will wait for all the monks to return. Then, of course, it was a tradition that they would take their one meal only at first. They would take the meal, the usual tradition now also. You see that forest monks now mostly take one meal only. It may be corresponding to the time around 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. Now you find that Theravadan tradition now, I would say that many monks or most monks also Theravada tradition, they will take 2 meals for the breakfast, and then one more is for the lunch before noon. So in the breakfast, the offerings a lot, they could actually just keep for the lunch also, right? So usually they go out in the part 1 round only, right? They don't go out twice like that or 3 times. No. Usually now you see the practice. So after they had, come back, so probably it could be before the meal time or what, or it could be after also, where the monks and nuns in that monastery would assemble in the hall. And then the Buddha would give a Dhamma talk, an inspiring Dhamma talk. Or imagine, according to the account in the scriptures, in 45 years, now you have more than 5,000, Actually, if you consider the repeated ones, there will be much more than that. But I say taking off the ones which are repeated already, so you can find at least 5,000 in the original, most authentic scriptures in the Pali canon. So imagine, so much of Dhamma he spread. And sometimes you would encourage, of course, you sometimes would encourage the monks to practice the Dhamma. And then, there will be some monks that had some personal issues or questions. They could also ask him for instruction, personal instruction, because different people have different minds. And the Buddha with his, omniscient mind, all-knowing mind, and then also psychic powers, he could actually look into the minds of the monks and find out what sort of ways would be suitable for him to practice. In a lot of stories also along this line. So the Buddha, with his psychic powers, he knew this particular monk needed this method. So the Buddha would reflect, would read the minds of the monks, find out their individual nature, and then will give them the correct and wise personal advice that would suit them best, so they could progress well in their practice. So that was a part of his daily routine. So here you could see the Buddha coming to the hall and then talking to the Buddha, the disciples, and then he show here counseling the some individual monks that have issue. So now let us go on to slide number 11 now. Now, I told you just now that in India, you have 4 seasons. You have the very hot season, sometime around May or June, very, very hot, and it's not advisable to go pilgrimage during the hot season. The temperatures can reach until 45 degrees Celsius. Wow, it's burning hot. So most people would go during the cool time. If you go during the rainy season, also not suitable. It will be raining, and then the Buddhas, they all will be cultivating during the Vasa period, staying in the various monasteries, you see. So the most suitable, most people will go for pilgrimage during the cool season. And that will correspond to something like November, December, January, 3 or 4 months around that time, cool. We also went during that time. I went 3 times also in December, I think. 3 times also was in December. So in the summertime, still, of course, the people from the neighborhood would visit him in the evenings. Evening maybe not so hot, but still it's not cool, right? So in the evening, there will be lay people coming to see the Buddha in the evening, and they would bring him gifts, others to hear his teachings. But what you can offer to the monks, basically the 4 requisites only. You could also offer food, you could offer the medicine, right? And then you could offer clothing. Clothing in this case usually will be the robes now. But during that time, they could also offer pieces of cloth, right? Maybe white cloth, and then the Sangha members would dye them and then make into robes. But now, very often people offer robes, just like that, And then the other one is, because they have their monasteries and the kutis, so they could offer things pertaining to the places they stay. Maybe certain parts broken down already, need repair, you need some wood and whatever. So these are the 4 requisites only. No money and no radio. During the time, so no radio. No all the luxury. Only small requisites only. Right? And then the Buddha would teach them the Dhamma. And in different places, he would use the dialects of the place so that everyone would benefit. So he used various languages, right? And later on, when he was recorded down, so the language that was recorded down, the closest was Pali. Actually, it was Magadhi language called that time. But then it is closest to Pali, just like Bahasa Malaysia and Bahasa Indonesia, that close. So that all these things are evidences. You could see, actually, you go to India, the places that the Buddha had been, you would come across the pillars, Pillars later on, how many hundreds of years later on, Asoka Emperor, he became a very staunch Buddhist, and he had all the teachings, the original teachings, all engraved onto these pillars of stone or rocks and so on. You can see this, because they dug up the thing and then they found that actually the writings were in this language. That's how the Pali Canon came, right? The most original, authentic source of the teachings of the Buddha. So everybody was very happy. Imagine to encounter a fully enlightened Buddha. They were very happy and satisfied with the advice given by the Buddha and the Dhamma teachings. And many accounts you will see people who were really ready. Some became arahants even, just by listening. And then also some reached the first stage of sainthood, the Sotapanna. So fantastic, isn't it? So now these pictures show that people coming, bringing the food, and sometimes the Buddha would go out and preach under the tree or in the kuti hall, or in the hall of the monastery and so on. So you see, a very interesting, very peaceful type of living, isn't it? Not like today, many people so busy running here and there with their work, all stressed up and all those. It's completely different. So you can be inspired to find more peace in your life. Now let us go on to slide. The next slide will be number 12 already. So after the people had left already, usually the Buddha would take a bath and then he would meditate. You can see the picture here. Of course, now I told you already, taking the bath doesn't mean go to the bathroom and so on. You go to the river only, all right? And then they will take the bath there, and then they will use substitute soap, maybe ashes or what lah. Those days are more than 2,600 years ago, so you can imagine the setting. But it was very, very peaceful. That's why there were so many supporters and devotees. Very, very little stress, hardly. Today you find opposite. Even though we are so progressive with all the high-tech gadgets and so on, but you have more sicknesses and more people who get problems of the mind, isn't it? Isn't it an irony? Something. So for us to think, if you want to be more peaceful, happy, then you have to cut down the stress by living, according to the Dhamma, living in a simple manner. Then the Buddha would meditate. Then after that, he would instruct the monks who came from other places. There will be monks coming from other places. This in the summertime, summertime, not during the rainy season, a very typical rainy season. And the Buddha will be, and the disciples will be doing their own self-cultivation. At the end of the 3 or 4 months period, then they will have the katina, or the offering of robes, that period. So during that time, it was a different happening. So it was summertime, and the Buddha would sometimes he still be outside, and then so he would give the Dhamma teaching. So he helped the people to understand the different parts of the Dhamma, and of course the people were very happy. As I told you, some became enlightened even just by listening with the focused attention, mindfully, wise reflection. So these people who became Arahant, actually in previous lives, they had already cultivated and probably reached very high absorption levels of the mind in the meditation. They reached the jhanas already. So by just listening with focused attention, they became the enlightened. Then at sunset time, the Buddha usually would go for a walk, or probably would be doing the walking meditation, right, in nature. And after this, again in the evening time, he will give talks to his monks. So you see his life, giving so many talks. No wonder we have more than 5,000, right? Not discarding the one repeated, but you include the rest, wow, I don't know how many thousands, right? So late at night, so then at night also, distinguished people, the VIPs, the kings of different kingdoms, the noble ones, and then also the high class people, the Brahmins, all these that came for advice and instruction also. So you see, and then according to the account, late in the night, the Buddha still gave the talk to the gods, the devas that came down. So now let us go on to the next slide. And this one just show you that some of the VIPs who come and visit the Buddha to ask for advice or questions and so on. And today you see also this happening, like for example, in some of the forest monasteries, if you look at the accounts of the life of Ajahn Chah in the forest monastery in Thailand, you could see this also. Very important people of the king lineage, noble ones, the generals and so on, who visit Ajahn Chah to get advice and blessings and all those. So very traditional, but very inspiring. Now let us go on to slide number 13 now. So in slide number 13, so after this, then, the Buddha would go to sleep. Usually 4 hours only, right? 4 hours. So sometimes could be less also, I think. So you find the nights are divided into very interesting. This season one is from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. is called the first watch of the night. And then 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. will be called the second watch of the night. And then the third last watch of the night will be from 2 to 6 a.m. Don't we consider those the different periods where the Buddha, like during enlightenment time also, that the first watch of the night, what did he do with the mind? The second watch, the third watch, like contemplating on the Four Noble Truths and understanding fully. So you see that the Buddha actually, in some accounts, they say will be time that he only probably would sleep for 1 or 2 hours only. But anyway, what we know is that the Buddha slept very little. Most of the time, will be giving the Dhamma talks, doing his own meditation, helping people. That will be his life. So fantastic, is it today? Most of the people are busy making money. Right? So maybe you can get inspired. You have to, of course, you cannot be like him. Maybe you can step up the time, where you can do cultivation, meditation, step up the time where you can help people more. Then, you at least, you only imitate the Buddha a bit lah. You could not do what he did, right? And then, when he, he slept, he would lie down in called the lion pose. No? Now, I've shown these two pictures to show you the lion pose. This one will be a more practical one. This is just an image. You could see this in Malaysia. If you go to Tumpat area in Kelantan, you could see the Buddha lying down position, and then the standing position, the sitting position. But this one a bit not so practical, because you put your hand against the head, it'll be quite tiring. So this one is a very relaxed. I like this particular pose, which you see in the place where the statue, in the place where Buddha passed away in Kushinaga. The image was something like this type, not propping out, but many temples show propping out like this, right? But the important point in the lion pose, which is a fantastic good pose. I also try to sleep in this way, but then once you sleep, really your body might move lah. A lot of benefits. I have no time to tell you all the benefits. But one important thing you see is that the heart is not pressed down. The heart is on the left side, and then the hand like this. Very good. You try to sleep in that way, you find a lot of benefits. So then he will wake up before sunrise. He will wake up before sunrise. Just now we say the third watch of the night, 2 to 6, isn't it? So before sunrise, he would then meditate, and then he would contemplate and reflect. Now, who will be the people coming? Right? And then who would be the people who could be helped, who have interest, and so on. Any individuals that are ready, having problems, and they can benefit from the Buddha, and maybe by listening can actually become enlightened, or also get the first stage. So he will contemplate on all these before he decides to give talks to selected people. There are some people you find not ready one. Today I realize this also. No point one. They are not ready. You will know. You speak to them, they go to sleep, or they don't focus their attention. So you must be ready to receive the Dhamma. Like now we see how many people are watching. Very, very few. But to me, if that one person is very, very keen and sincerely interested, I will still give the Dhamma sharing and the talk, because that's the way the things are. The Buddha's time also was like that. Now let us go on to the next one, which is slide number 14 now. And slide number 14, the Buddha always worked very hard, He was so hardworking for 45 years of teaching the Dhamma, spreading the Dhamma. He even asked the 60 first Arahants to go to different places. No two monks should be walking the same route, so that the thing can spread far and wide. And when he was not traveling from place to place, he would, the time when he would be staying put in one particular monastery or what, then he would spend his time also explaining the Dhamma to the people who came, you see. And then, so many people with problems, isn't it? To come for counseling. Just as you read the life of Ajahn Chah, I read a few versions. Wow, very busy. Because so many people, including the kings and generals, have problems, isn't it? So you see, on all these advice Ajahn Chah gave are all recorded in books and so on already now. So the Buddha's time was like that also. And he was always willing to help people from any station of life. The compassion perfect, isn't it? Wisdom also. Whether it's a housewife, a farmer, or just somebody in need of help. So all these pictures show this these two pictures especially. All these three pictures show the compassionate nature of Buddha, helping in all ways. So now let us go on to the next slide, which is slide number 15 already. Now let us look at number 15. Now, so the Buddha, you could see, he was never reluctant to help anybody or to answer Dhamma questions or explain complicated problems. He was always ready to do that, right? So you see, the compassion was fantastic, right? He never felt angry. He never felt irritated. Some people would ask silly questions. The Buddha, the calm disposition, would explain to him, your question is not properly put, so he would be able to answer correctly. And he, more or less, he could read the minds of the people. Nowadays, you have also some cultivated monks who, before you could ask, he already would, answer your questions through his Dhamma talk already. Very funny when I've experienced this also. Right? So in the end, the question answered already. Especially in the retreat. In the retreat, you find you have certain questions, but the monk or the meditation teacher would know, right? There are many people having these questions, so you give the Dhamma talk, raising these points. So in the end, you find answer already before asking. So the Buddha had that psychic mind, he could answer the questions in the most wise way and suit the person according to his needs. So the Buddha always explained the Dhamma in a way that was most suited to the nature of his listeners because he got the wisdom, and he would use all very, very enlightening methods. He would use stories, parables, metaphors, similes, all various ways to illustrate also. And today also you see that Ajahn Chah, I like to read the accounts of him and his life. He also used a lot of parables. Actually, not only in Buddhism, even in Christianity, like Jesus Christ also used very good parables to teach certain very important teachings. And then also in Christianity also you have Dhamma also, right? You cannot say Dhamma is only in Buddhism. So and he welcomed all people, no discrimination, whether it's from the kampung or the kings and the noblemen or the generals, he will welcome all these people. So of course some came at first with doubts, right? With doubts, they say, is this really the fully enlightened one? He could answer all questions. And Buddha rarely would show the psychic powers. But there were instances where he had to use the psychic powers to show, wow, his psychic powers were so great. And then the people really convinced me. Then only they were ready to listen to him. So sometimes he did use, but most of the time, no. Right? And then he also, passed a rule that the monks should not just simply display their psychic power and then become arrogant and, misleading people and so on. But must be used with wisdom, right? So at first, some did not get convinced, but later when they became convinced already, of course, they decided to follow him, and then they would take refuge. Take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. That is the thing. Not like today, you have certain groups that say, take refuge in the teacher, and then after that, only the Buddha, then after that, only the Dhamma and the Sangha. That is not correct, The original one is just, even after Buddha passed away already, still the refuge should be in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Right? So that is the thing. They know our perfect teacher, or the enlightened one. That means we are going to follow the ideal of the Buddha. As close as possible, we are going to lead our life based on that perfect teacher, the model. It might not reach that level, but then that is our aspiration. So from here, you can see, right, that you got a huge following. And today, I think you have so many Buddhists all over the world. So many of them became very loyal disciples. And when he preached, you will have so many monks, nuns, and then lay people in that locality. Sometimes you find a whole town like Rajagaha, there was on occasion thousands of people who come to listen, including the king. So that It's a very inspiring thing. Here you see Buddha tending to individual 2 or 3 years old, he will just speak. Now let us go on to the this comes to the last slide already. Right? So as usual, we hope, right, that you'll be inspired. And just like in the previous parts also, I use back these same words. The background is different. The background. This one, I like this background, the Buddha meditating or contemplating and so on. So we make this aspiration, right? And then resolve to follow. May we be inspired by the life of Buddha. Right? May we strive on in the Dhamma to end the dukkha. So you see, it's very important to make the aspiration, to put that strong aspiration, that determination, that vow, or whatever you want to call it, into your mind, And then, when you go over the life of the Buddha, you do some thinking and so on. It's not like reading a storybook. You do some thinking and reflecting, you can find it will be truly inspiring. I don't know how many times I have read about the life of the Buddha over the last 30, 40 years. Many, many times already. And then once you are inspired, you are really, very committed already. So we will strive on in the Dhamma to end dukkha. Right? So we will follow the teachings. Because we are inspired by a perfect teacher like the fully enlightened Sama Sambuddho. And then also you'll be inspired to share the Dhamma with other people who are ready, who have the affinity. And that is a very meritorious action. As I've said many times, the gift of Dhamma is the greatest gift. I've explained all this before. So now, before we say sadhu 3 times, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the boys and girls, the students of Buddhist Sunday School and Dhamma classes, and the youth section members, and then also the parents, grandparents who are also teaching good things, moral education and Dhamma to the young ones. And of course, to all those teachers that have been so dedicated to promote the Dhamma, to teach the Dhamma to the younger ones. Right? So, sadhu to all of you. And thank you for following this presentation patiently. You have put in the effort and you have practiced mindfulness and focused attention. That is something very meritorious. So now let us hold our palms and say sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May all of you be well, happy, peaceful, and may the Dhamma be with you always. Take care.